Hello chess enthusiasts, my name is Miha and welcome to my chessrealm YouTube channel. So another interesting game from the German team league or Schachbundesliga as they call it, from the second round between Pavel Eljanov playing as white and Vassily Ivanchuk playing as black. Let's see what happened. Pavel Eljanov started with d4, d5, c4, c6, and we have Slav defense. White continues with knight to f3, knight to f6, e3, bishop goes to f5, white plays knight to c3, pretty much according to the theory, and now black plays e6, also more or less according to the theory, and now to h4, now attacking bishop on f5. Now usually bishop goes to e4 or g6. In the game bishop to g6 is played, knight of course can capture or not, so white doesn't capture. Bishop to e2 was played, preparing to castle king side, and now black plays knight from b goes to d7, and of course now white castles king side, and since white has already moved his light square bishop, black captures with pawn on c4, and white recaptures with bishop, so white has lost a tempo, but that's nothing tragic actually. Black continues with bishop to h5, attacking queen on d1. Now white had to be a little careful because after, let's say, queen to c2, simply knight 2 goes to d5, and we have discovered attack on knight on h4. There's no good way of defending because g3 would weaken his kingside position, because this light square bishop on h5 is very strong on the light squares, and after, let's say, knight to f3, bishop simply capture, g pawn recapture, white gets double pawns along the f file, and this is not actually very pleasant. So in the game, white plays bishop to e3, some sort of protecting this f3 square, and black says, okay, let's trade some pieces. Bishop captures on e2, queen recaptures. Maybe in this position the best option for black would be simply maybe bishop to e7, later castling king side. That would be a totally solid option, but in the game black has decided to strike the center, so c5 was played, targeting this pawn on d4. Of course black is hoping for d captures on c5, later bishop recaptures, but white doesn't go for it. Instead rook to d1 was played, extracting this queen on c8, so black plays c pawn captures on d4, e pawn recaptures, and white is threatening here with d5. Maybe it's not obvious, but this is quite serious threat. Let's say that black makes a random move, let's say rook to c8, simply d5. We have double attack on this pawn. Now pawn cannot capture because it's pinned by the queen, and after, for example, bishop to c5, let's say the d pawn captures on e6, f pawn recaptures, queen captures, white is a pawn up, and let's say black defends check with queen to e7, doesn't help. Queen goes back to b3, still preventing castling his king side, and king is totally in the open, not to mention white is a pawn up, and this is much better position for white. So in the game, black plays knight goes to b6, further protecting this d5 square, preparing to occupy it with a knight, but white is on the move and immediately takes the opportunity. Knight to f5 was played. Of course, e pawn cannot capture because it's pinned by the queen, and of course white is targeting this pawn on g7 because it's protected only by the bishop. Bishop cannot move, so black would be able to castle king side there, but currently bishop cannot move. And of course g6 maybe is not the best option, because after that simply knight goes to h6. Again, if bishop captures, white dark square bishop captures, taking over the whole dark square, so this is again not the best option for black. So in the game, black plays knight from f goes to d5, preparing to trade some knights, but of course white doesn't go for it and keeps the pressure. Knight goes to e4. Now the main idea is to threaten with bishop to g5. Of course, black cannot capture with e pawn on f5 because knight goes to f6, and here we have double check and mate. And if, for example, black should try with a random move, let's say a6, then simply bishop to g5, attacking queen on d8. Bishop to e7 simply doesn't help because after that knight from e goes to d6, it's check. Of course bishop cannot capture because then black loses queen, and this knight is also protected. So after the only move, king to f8, queen to h5, threatening checkmate here of f7. Queen to e8 doesn't help because it's e8 square is protected by the knight, and after g6 defending, queen to h6, king to g8, and queen to g7, checkmate. So in the game, black plays h6, preventing this unpleasant bishop to g5. And white continues with a4, preparing a5, driving this knight away. Okay, black doesn't care, a6 was played, and now white continues with knight to c5, targeting this defenseless pawn on g7, also targeting this pawn on e6, which is far more serious threat. Again, bishop capturing this on c5, not exactly advisable, because at any time knight can capture here on g7. Pawn on g7 would be defenseless, not very pleasant actually. And if, for example, black plays a red move, let's say h5, simply knight captures on e6, f-pawn recaptures, queen to e6 check. Of course, queen cannot defend on e7 because knight is protecting. If, let's say, knight to e7 defending, and then knight to e6, and king cannot go anywhere, and black could only sacrifice his queen. If, for example, bishop goes to e7, then we simply have knight to g7 check. The only option is king to f8, but after queen to g6, white prepared this knight to e6, very unpleasant. Black can only defend with queen to e6, but after queen to d6, but knight to e6 now. Again, the only option is if black sacrifices queen for a knight. So in the game, black plays queen to f6, attacking this knight on f5. Knight goes back to g3, and now this pawn on b7 is still attacked, so rook to b8 defending, and now white continues with rook to a3, preparing rook to f3, deadly attack on the queen. Black responds with knight to d7. Of course, offering the trade of knights. Of course, knight can capture, king can recapture, black loses the right to castle, but maybe then black would somehow solidify his defense, so white keeps the pressure. Knight to h5 was played, attacking queen on f6. Well, maybe the best option simply would be queen to e7, trying to somehow solidify his defense, because after, let's say, for example, queen to h4, simply knight captures on e6. If f-pawn recaptures, queen simply recaptures, attacking king and knight. And of course, if black tries to defend with knight to e7, then rook to h3, and queen is trapped. So in the game, queen to f5 was played. And now white plays another stunning move, rook to f3, attacking queen on f5. Of course, this knight on h5 is not protected because queen is blocked by his own rook, but white is already so much better. Black more or less has no other option but to capture this knight, so queen goes to h5, and now another stunning move, knight to e6. Of course, if f-pawn recaptures knight, then we have simply rook captures on f8. After, let's say, king recaptures, queen simply captures queen. For a queen, black has rook and a piece. In some position maybe enough, but definitely not in this. I cannot go explaining all the variation, but here white is definitely winning. So in the game, black plays knight goes to e7, preventing this immediate discovered check on the king, but white keeps the pressure. Rook goes to e1, putting on the additional pressure here on the king. Well, black really cannot do anything. White is threatening with this knight to g7. Let's see if black plays a red move, let's say b5. Knight simply captures on g7. It's a check, and also attack on the queen. If black doesn't want to lose the queen, after bishop captures on g7, queen to e7, it's checkmate. And as stated before, if f-pawn captures on e6, rook simply captures, it's check. If king captures, queen captures. Again, totally winning position for white. Anyway, in the game, in this position, black had enough and resigned the game. So I hope you like this game. I hope you have learned something from it. If you have any questions, my email is below in the description. Of course, I invite you to visit my Instagram page. That's it for now, and see you soon.